Good morning. It is great to be here. Do you ever have those moments where you think your brain is working and you realize later it wasn't working the way that you intended it to? Wednesday night I wrote an announcement for you for the zoo, and I even read it to you and still never caught it until this morning, that the age, I would ask that if you're under 7th grade, not 7 years of age, that you bring an adult with you. So if you're under 7th grade, bring an adult. But that is my little thing to bring to you this morning before the lesson. It was a month ago. A month ago, we took a retreat, and this was our topic, the idea of side by side, coming out of Philippians 1, starting in verse 27 through 30. This is a passage of Scripture that, to me, has been on my mind for at least the last year, looking at this idea of, what does this mean? How does this impact me? How does this impact the church? For us at the youth retreat, the youth and family retreat, we talked about how it impacts us as just a part of the congregation here and being united, working side by side, striving together. But I think it's so much more than just the youth, so much more than just the youth and their families. Paul here was giving this to an entire congregation of believers of all ages, of working together. Have you ever strove for something by yourself or then strove for something with someone else? Just striving together. It was about a year before Carrie and I got married. She suggested, why don't we run a 5K, Daniel? Now, I didn't look much different than you can tell I'm not much of a runner. She said, it's not that far. It won't be that hard, and you can walk some of it too. And I had tried to have already started jogging a little bit at the time with a friend and trying to get in better shape. And I thought, okay, I had worked up to where I was jogging a half a mile, sometimes a mile, and I thought, it was, I think about August at the time that we discussed this, and we were going to do it in December. I thought I can work up to 3 miles. And so I got to we were running, me and this friend, pretty regular, probably 4 times a week, if not 5 or 6. And we were working hard, building this, and now he was running laps around me while I was running. But I was out there and working on this with him, and then about a month before time came, I found out it's not a 5K. It's actually a 4.2 mile run, which a 5K is about 3.1. And so now I've got to add on another mile and a tenth or so in a month. 3 miles is already a stretch. I had run 3 miles one time at that point. And so I worked, and we got there, and we went, and we ran a race. But it was hard because I'd been running it on a track. And this was on hills and through neighborhoods and around all of the stuff going on around us. Carrie had gone on, and she would run up ahead, and then she would come back. And she would say, come on, Daniel, you've got it. And I was jogging, I was running. One time, there was probably a mile and a half or so towards the end, and she came back to encourage me, and I'm positive I was the last person. The walkers were ahead of me. And somebody saw her and said, are we going the wrong way? But through her encouragement, this friend of mine, in exercising and working out, for that time I was able to get up to being able to accomplish this task and felt very good about being able to, at that point in time, run or jog this 4.2 mile race. I couldn't have got there on my own. I couldn't have. Running is difficult, and you need that encouragement. You need something or somebody to push you, to encourage you. Paul often compared the Christian life to an athletic event. You need that person, that group of people to push you, to challenge you, to hold you up, to keep you faithful. So Paul here in Philippians 1. He had, at this point, been kind of just updating the Philippians about his situation. We see, obviously, through Paul that he is always joyful. He's always confident, and that's what he's expressed so far up to this point, telling the people there about his situation. But then he goes into verse 27, giving some pretty practical exhortations about the Christian life. And the first thing he's going to talk about concerns the manner of life to which we live. Paul says there in verse 27, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or I'm absent, I may hear of you, that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. And so we look at that word, or those words, manner of life. Maybe yours says your conduct. What does that mean? How does that apply? How do I work through that? The original language, what Paul said is, behave as citizens. Live your life as citizens. To those there in Philippi, this would have a very special meaning. Philippi was a Roman colony, but wasn't actually there at Rome. It was pretty far away. But they knew that being part of Rome, they had to live as Romans. They didn't want Caesar finding out that they weren't following the Roman law. They didn't want Caesar to find out that they were doing what Romans shouldn't do. And Paul tells them, live as citizens, but of heaven. But of heaven there. And so they would get this idea of living a life in a certain way because of where their citizenship lied. He would tell them later in Philippians 3 and verse 20, we're citizens of heaven. That's where our citizenship is at. For a Christian, we belong to heaven. And so our behavior then as citizens of heaven should reflect that. Should be, as he says, worthy of the gospel. So then that leads us to know there's a behavior that's not worthy of the gospel, a behavior that's unfitting of a Christian. We're to act worthy, not to bring shame to the gospel. We think about, you hear about Americans who travel to foreign countries and they bring shame upon America. You don't want them we're not all that way. And he's saying, don't bring shame on heaven. Don't let people who hear you say I'm a Christian see you behave in a shameful way. Don't act like the world. Don't be like the world. Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 2, would have us to remember our conduct as we sojourn here on this earth and in this country that's not our own. If we're not behaving as citizens of heaven, then there's only one alternative. But that behavior should be behavior of heaven, worthy of the gospel, whether there's other Christians around or not. How do we act when nobody knows? How do we act when nobody's here to check up on me? Paul told them, let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or I am absent, don't behave just because I'm there. Don't behave just because someone else is seeing that and knowing the way that you should behave. This idea of environmental faith. The environment that we're in determines our faith sometimes, or our behavior sometimes. An environmental faith is a faith that's dependent upon our environment. For example, remaining faithful while at home, remaining faithful while with our church family. But leaving that context and going to another and not being faithful. Being faithful around church family, but being unfaithful around worldly friends, worldly family, and not maintaining the faith of the gospel. So what are some signs then of environmental faith? There's all sorts of different signs, all sorts of different things that we can see. Studying the Bible when others are around, when others see us, but never taking our own personal time to spend studying our Bible. Praying when others see us, but not spending time praying when we're alone. A lack of personal closeness and dependence upon God, upon His Son. Paul's hope was that these Philippians' behavior wouldn't be dependent upon whether they expected him to come back or not, but that they would behave as citizens of heaven because that's what they're supposed to do. Likewise, our behavior should be that as citizens of heaven and not dependent upon who's around us or who may be coming around us. Our manner of life then involves, as Paul would say, standing firm in one spirit. Standing firm in this one spirit. There's things that try and overcome us. Things that try and overpower us. Things that try and lead us astray and distract us. But behaving as citizens of heaven, living this manner of life, we stand firm in one spirit. We stand firm united. We stand firm together. Because that's how we're strengthened. That's how we're encouraged. That's how we push forward. We also not just stand firm, but it is in that one spirit, right? It is united together. It is joined together with other Christians, with other citizens who hold us there and who we hold there as well, whom we help and they help us. Paul also brings to them this manner of life involves having one mind and striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. Looking at this, I kept digging deeper and deeper in this to try and grab a hold of what is Paul saying? What does he mean with all of this? The word striving here, Paul uses a term that would generally be meant for a military term or a gladiator battle type term. This striving, this fighting, this life and death type situation. And to Paul, the way that we live is life and death. To God, the way that we live is life and death. We have to strive together. We're not in this fight alone. That's the wonderful thing about this, is we're not alone. We have one another. We have our encouragement that comes from our brothers and our sisters. Our conduct is unbecoming of the gospel, though, if we are not striving for the faith of the gospel, if we are not doing it in unity with our brethren. We have to be in unity. See, Paul knew that if we don't strive together for the faith of the gospel, that we're in danger of that gospel becoming distorted, of becoming changed into something that's not true. It continues on forever, this danger. If we don't continue the fight for the faith of the gospel, then it becomes changed oftentimes. And we get further and further from the gospel. Paul then encourages them in the next few verses, don't be afraid of anything by your opponents or your adversaries. Whatever your translation says there. He says, not finding anything by your opponents. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. Christians who are walking in a manner worthy of the gospel shouldn't be troubled by what's coming at them from the world. It's difficult. It's hard. It's tough with the things that come at us, the persecution, the insults, the things that we hear if we're truly living a manner worthy of the gospel. But that's our encouragement. Paul says that's the encouragement to know that you're living that life of salvation. In Matthew 5, Jesus, beginning his Sermon on the Mount, would say, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. There may come a time when we truly have to suffer for the name of Christ. That time came for Paul. That time likely came for the Philippians. And should it ever come for us to truly suffer in that way, we count it a privilege. I think of what Paul had just told the Philippians, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Oh, how much he wanted to die and to go on to heaven to reap that reward. But he told them also, for your sake, I'll stay, and I'll fight, and I'll be here for you through the suffering, through the torture, to be that encouragement. It's hard, but one of the things that for us to do is to have the attitude of the apostles in Acts 5 who were persecuted, who were imprisoned, and who left rejoicing because they had been counted worthy to suffer for the name of Christ. So some things that are involved in behaving as citizens of the kingdom of heaven and having a manner of life worthy of the gospel of Christ. To stand firm in one spirit. To have one mind striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and to not be frightened in anything by our opponents. Paul goes on further to give more in the next chapter. I challenge you to continue on and reading and studying that. And what does it mean for you and for us? These are ways for us to live no matter what our environment may be, no matter who we may be around, no matter where we may be. Stand firm. Remain united. fight, strive together. The New York Yankee great, Babe Ruth, he said the way a team plays as a whole determines its success. You may have the greatest bunch of individual stars in the world, but if they don't play together, the club won't be worth a dime. God's given His church a task. Go into the world. Make disciples. Fight together. Stand together on His Word. Don't allow it to be changed. Don't allow others to bring in change. Is our conduct worthy of the gospel of Christ? Are we behaving as citizens of heaven while we sojourn here on this earth? What changes do we need to make? I love the unity that God and His apostles desire to have from their church. I love the unity that I see here at Hampton. And I hope that as with anything, we work to always be striving to have that unity and to stand together and to fight for the gospel. We will always be encouraged to keep up that fight. Today, if there's changes that you need to make in your life, we want to be here for you through that. We want to help you, to pray with you, to study with you. We offer this time now, if you would come while we stand and sing this song.